Like, what is it about an organization and how it works or doesn't that you can't even operationalize a thing that you are legitimately stoked about?
Yeah.
Like, that is very, very interesting. And that has been like our work since day one.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I am Rodney Evans, and that guy in the black, is that a V-neck, Sam? Is Sam Sprayland?
Yes, of course. Of course.
It could
What up,
go
Rodney?
either way. I don't know. Also, so our listeners know, the AI transcript thinks that Sam Sprayland's last name is Sprayland, and so we're just leaning into it, and we just call him that now, which is fun, and you should too.
What we know is that in this week's AI transcript, it'll interpret that correctly as my actual last name, which is Sperlin.
Probs. I look forward to that. Welcome
Absolutely.
back to At Work with the Ready. This is a podcast about modernizing organizations as the future of work meets the present moment.
As you know, each episode, we turn our attention to one common organizational pattern that we think is worth digging into. We pull it apart like a fresh piece of bread, and we propose solutions for what to do instead.
This week, I feel butterflies about this. This week, we're talking about traditional consulting. Should be spicy, but before we get into it, let's do a check-in so I can get present and calm down.
I am going to take over this check-in round as an opportunity for you to just give me some advice.
I love this.
And the advice that I want from Rodney today is, what's your best piece of moving advice? I'm in the midst of moving. Next week, I'm moving from Virginia to New York, and I want you to just hit me with some knowledge, some wisdom.
Okay. I've moved a lot. Ed and I moved, at one point, I think we moved 8 times in 7 years or something like that. Something insane. We've moved a lot together. So I have so much moving advice because I've made some truly terrible decisions.
Should we just change this episode today?
This
Should we just do a
episode is
special
about
moving
life
episode?
hacks with Rodney, and it's just about moving. Number one, do not cheap out on movers. They're the ones who charge you exorbitantly. It's going to make you want to vomit, but it's actually worth it. It's one of the few industries where I think you actually get what you pay for. And having gone the bargain route, it was a terrible mistake. Number two, when it's coming time to pack, take everything off your walls first. Because once you take the personality out of your house, it won't feel like your home anymore. And it will be much, much easier to pack your shit up and get it out of there than if you're still trying to like maintain some semblance of home. 3, I could do this all day, but I'm going to limit myself to 3. Get your stuff unpacked in less than 72 hours.
Okay. Yeah.
I just am I'm like in no boxes because it's like we got to just, even if it's not in its final location, I cannot work and exist as a person with cardboard boxes around my house. So just like 100%. Get it done.
Yeah. Well, we arrive on a Thursday and I have to fly out on Monday for our retreat. So
Perfect.
The goal is to be as moved in as possible by the time I leave on Monday.
Ideal. Okay. So since I gave you moving advice, you get to give me advice on a topic of your choosing.
That is an impossible check-in round.
Why? That's so fun. You love giving advice.
It's so vast. Can you help me narrow it just slightly?
Okay. What is your best advice for completing a task you don't want to do?
Ooh. Okay. One thought. Find something you want to do even less than the thing you don't want to do, and then procrastinate doing that one by doing the thing that you don't want to do.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. You could also, I mean, this is so cliche, but like break it down into its smallest parts. But I'm talking like,
give me a varsity move.
Like stupidly small parts. Like the only thing I have to do, the only commitment for me working on this task today is sitting down at my desk and like looking at it. And that's it for today. Tomorrow, I have to sit down, look at it, and like write one word. And eventually you're going to get to a point where you're like, this is stupid, and I'm just going to do the thing. This is mostly,
good.
I think, an insight into my brain more than actual advice for you.
That's all right. I'll take it.
Rodney Evans, what the hell are we doing today?
Well, first you're doing a
what we're
review
doing.
request.
Yeah. Some people did it. So we've been asking for reviews.
No
yeah,
shit.
We got at least 1 or 2 new reviews in. So if you like the show and you haven't reviewed it on your platform of choice, we could really use it. Give us those 5 stars and some words of encouragement.
Yay. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Okay, so today I'm giving a little bit more preamble today than normal because this is a pattern that is a little spicier because we're not just talking about client organizations or our own organization. We're talking about a whole other industry that exists that creates confusion with our industry. And so the idea here is to talk a little bit about, I'm going to call it trad consulting, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we mean that is and isn't, from the perspective of org designers. And the idea here isn't to like roast or mock or shit upon the management consulting industry. The idea here is actually just to like clarify what that looks like in our projects and how it is different than what we do, both because most of our clients are large organizations who work with big consultancies. And I think actually it probably does a service for both them and us to be clear in terms of what is different about how we work. And for those of you who are out there who are like practitioners and are like, I'm going to turn this off because I actually don't care about this, you probably should care about it because more and more we're all using the same kind of words around the future of work and around adaptive orgs and saying things like VUCA and saying things like participatory change. And so like it's actually kind of important, even if you're a single shingle human out there, to know how this is going in the world. So stick around and tell Sam and I what you think afterward. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you are, I like that single shingle phrase. If you are a single shingle, but you describe yourself as some sort of consultant or something near management consultant, you are, whether you realize it or not, experiencing some of the same things that we are in conversations that you're having with potential clients. There is a big body of assumptions that comes along with any sort of management consultant or management consulting that you should probably really be aware of if you aren't already.
Totes.
So the essential pattern that we want to dig into here, I think, can be summed up initially with just one sentence, which is something along the lines of hiring external consultants as a band-aid to a broken operating system. Traditional consultants often maintain and propagate that operating system because the incentives are aligned. That's how they get paid, and that's what the client pays them for. So that's the pattern that we want to interrogate a little bit and offer some thoughts and some better ways forward rather than doing that.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. So let's just let's give a little lay of the land here. So when we're talking about traditional consulting, what we're talking about is the big companies, that we all know and love, like the McKinseys, the Deloittes, the BCGs, who all have different specialties and different areas of expertise, but who do things like strategy, business plans, process reengineering, spans and layers, restructuring. I know they do lots of other things as well, but like those are the things that we typically see in our projects. Often we end up in organizations after those consulting companies have been there because they have done work around something like a new strategy that the company is struggling to execute or operationalize, which is, again, in the spirit of like, this is not about roasting a different industry. Like there's not something wrong with the strategy. The client hired them to make a strategy and then they did. And then the problem becomes...
And then what?
The execution, which is not the fault of the management consultancy that the OS of the client is not set up to execute a strategy that might be excellent and exactly right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, not to wander down the paths of history, but, the original kind of impetus for undercurrent, kind of the organization prior to the Ready and then early days of the Ready, that original organization did a lot of strategy work, doing that sort of work, and made a lot of great strategies, handed them to lots of very happy clients, and then watched that work never get operationalized. And I think a lot of these consulting firms are happy, like, all right, we got our paycheck, we're going to go do our next thing. Like, we did our part. And to Aaron's credit and the folks who were doing that work back in the day, they became really interested in that question. Like, what is it about an organization and how it works or doesn't, that you can't even operationalize a thing that you are legitimately stoked about.
Yeah.
Like that is very, very interesting. And that has been like our work since day one.
Yeah. And not just limited to the trad sort of management consultancies. I've heard the same thing about agencies that do purpose work. I've heard the same thing about agencies that do insights work, that do PR or marketing or ad work. Anyone who is providing basically the content and getting paid to create the content to a client who then can't make use of that content is kind of what we're talking about here.
Totally. And I mean, I feel like we could do a whole episode just on like that sort of idea. But I mean, it's basically the undervaluing of the seemingly obvious work of like, well, we have the good idea now, right? Like we have the idea. That was the hard thing.
That was the hard part.
Someone who gave us the idea.
Right.
Now all we have to do is execute. All we have to do is make it happen. And I think that has proven itself over and over again, both in our work and just in organizations more broadly, that is actually the hard part.
Yeah.
The execution, and especially if it requires any sort of shift in your operating system to actually make happen, which chances are it does if we're talking something like strategy, because if the strategy you were capable of coming up with and running with was good, then you wouldn't be hiring consultants to give you a new one. And then, so it's a whole ball of wax.
Is it a ball of spaghetti?
It's a ball of spaghetti.
And how do we eat balls of spaghetti, Sam?
One noodle at a time.
Have you put down your knife and fork since the first episode of this show?
Them in half. I couldn't remember what the bit was. You cut them in half with a knife and a fork.
I can't believe Jack ever let you forget.
I know. Do you know that man sends me reels about hot dogs at least daily?
Really?
Still? Oh yes.
Okay. We're getting into the thing now. So
we're getting into it.
The first bit that we already started to allude to is clients are often, and by clients, I mean companies, not just our clients. But they're often buying they're buying content. They're buying expertise or strategy or research or best practices. And those things are ultimately delivered to them in some kind of like polished asset, whether that's a deck or a plan or a series of communications, or like the thing that they're buying is that. And then that becomes this very tangible, very sort of surface level work. So I think that they keep buying that because they're like, I can see this. I understand exactly what I'm getting. Often, if what they're buying is a new structure, they can clearly see what the headcount reduction of that structure is going to be and exactly how many dollars it's going to save. And probably because the people making it have MBAs and are better at math than I am, that's probably right. And so they're like, I think it feels and it persists because it's like a client is saying, I have this need, I have this unknown. A consultant is saying, here is the answer to the question that you have. And a client is like, great, I needed that level of certainty, and the dollars or the head count or the whatever delivery is like the box is getting checked. So I think that's like why that keeps going. The thing that I think is suboptimal about that is that, first of all, clients ultimately, to your earlier point about undercurrent, become like a little fiddly and sometimes kind of irritated because they can't execute, which again, not the fault of the asset that the client can't use it, but still true nonetheless. And I also think to be balanced about it, I also do think sometimes consultancies are like, well, the client should just be able to like fix their operation to do this, which as we've discussed on this show 9 zillion times, like easier said than done to just adapt your OS to go after a completely different kind of strategy, especially if you're
totally. And in defense of the clients, none of these consulting firms are marketing themselves as we'll give you a deliverable. Like we all know like that's what we're getting from this, but the actual dialogue is like, we're going to like help you. It's all about outcomes, right? Because they're like smart. They know
Sure.
organizations want to buy outcomes,
Sure.
but they end up in many cases equivocating outcomes with the deliverable. And then we just stay at this surface level that is incredibly visible. We can all check the boxes that said we did what we needed to do, and nothing fundamental has necessarily happened below the surface where the real operationalization actually has to happen, which is messy and hard to see often, hard to measure. And we're not getting into the work that we do yet, but now we're describing like what makes our work fun and difficult.
Yeah. And I think that often the consulting work that's purchased is very much a mirror of the altitude that the leader who's buying it sits at. So a lot of times when you're at the C-suite level or the executive team level or the senior leadership team level or whatever acronym, they're sitting outside of the day-to-day work. Like they're not in the hands-on keys. They're not sitting on the production line anymore. And so for the surface layer of the organization that they see most broadly and most clearly, a surface level solution makes sense. Like it is likely intuitive to a CEO who probably spends more time looking at like the high level financials and the quarterly earnings and the K10 and the board metrics than she does at like, decision speed at the team level. It makes sense at that layer to be buying a solution at that layer. Unfortunately, that has very little to do with how work actually gets done. That's just like the ambition and then the lagging indicator of that ambition, and it totally misses the whole part where something happens.
Right. And I think there's probably this cognitive dissonance between spending a shitload of money for a thing and having that thing be very focused at like low level, like how are we actually meeting and stuff, as opposed to like something quite visible, something very high level. I mean, and what the pattern that makes me think of is that often in organizations that we are working with, there's this feeling that it's not worth doing unless we do it big. Like, it's not even worth doing a thing unless we can scale it. We don't even know if it works yet, but we're talking already about whether or not it scales. And I think a lot of the big consulting firms kind of play into that with what they are selling into the organization, regardless and separate from whether or not it's what they actually need to be more effective.
Yeah, 100%. I also think just in talking about this altitude, we often see, I have a lot of thoughts, and like there's going to, the Ready is going to start like putting out more. So stay tuned around sort of the ecosystem around organizations and at what level various work actually does and does not happen. But one of the big ahas I had in a conversation with an advisor last year was like, there's the old trope of like it used to be nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. Now it's nobody gets fired for hiring McKinsey. And I think one thing that recurs in this pattern is like boards, particularly, well, any board really, even like a board of a nonprofit, boards often have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization that they sit on the board for. And they have responsibility for like hiring the CEO and setting that person's compensation. And at the same time, they have like very limited insight into what's actually happening inside of the organization beyond what they are hearing from the CEO or the C-suite. And so I think often an external consultant, like an external third party that does this kind of strategy level work, becomes a hedge for boards to be like, does this CEO's strategy line up or make sense? Or like, how do we give this CEO the support and research and best practice and industry knowledge to be making a really dialed strategy for this organization? Unfortunately, like that doesn't do anything either to strengthen the relationship between the C-suite and the board or to even necessarily always make the strategy better. It just, it creates reliance for the board's certainty on a third party and creates a validation requirement for the person who should theoretically be stewarding the ship on a third party. And so it's like everyone is sort of like outsourcing some level of responsibility and accountability for like being right about the direction of the business to someone who they believe knows better.
Yeah. Yeah. Who they have also paid to tell them the answer.
Totally.
So
Totally.
weird incentives abound.
Weird incentives abound. And I think that like that there's a lot in that dynamic that it gets kind of funky, but I think that what is certain about it is that it's not creating capacity in the board C-suite relationship for collective continuous steering.
Right. You need that third party there more or less indefinitely to keep that dynamic working. And if and when they go away, then you have not built the muscle memory about how to work together in a productive way.
Yeah, exactly. What else do you see in this one?
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you, when I was describing the pattern, there was a line about how traditional consultants maintain and propagate that kind of legacy OS within organizations. I was wondering, have we talked about that already, or are there other aspects of that come to mind for you?
I mean, I think the biggest thing, and I'm curious if you've seen this in projects, I certainly have. I think that it goes to your comment about the Band-Aid thing. So what I often see with consultancies that do more of like the business process reengineering and digging into workflow optimization or doing like project management-y type stuff is like cross-functional teaming, getting something done across an org chart. It doesn't work well in most places, as we've discussed in an entire episode of this show. And I think sometimes when a consulting firm is brought in, they are vested with the authority to make that work happen. And what that does is like then the third party is driving the project and creating accountability structures and sort of acting as a proxy for a leader who like doesn't have the time or attention. And it basically like doesn't create the pressure on the OS to figure out cross-functional teaming. You're just like, again, you're outsourcing the thing that's messy to someone else rather than fixing it. So it's like, how are you ever going to learn how to work cross-functionally if you're always going to hire a project team to do the blocking and tackling and hold all of the parties accountable and keep everything on the rails to get to the end? You're not. Like those people then are working in and upholding the existing power structure, the existing org chart, the existing siloing. They're just able to work around it in a way that people inside the organization can't.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the way that I have thought about it is that, you can make cross-functional teaming work in traditional or legacy OSs through brute force. Mm-hmm. And the way you can really do brute force is by hiring external consultants or external people to like do that and handle that and take on that extra or provide you that extra capacity to make a really gnarly process actually work, as opposed to what we would likely do is question some pretty fundamental assumptions about how this organization is actually working together and what we need structurally or authority-wise to actually get the work done. But that doesn't necessarily just create a bunch of knowable, visible work in a legacy operating system that, we could just go do. Like, we don't want to we are deathly allergic to anything that feels like make work. Like, we're just going through the motions, busy work. Like, there's like no busy work at the ready. If I ever feel like I'm doing busy work with a client, it's like a red alert alarm, like something is broken here, because there's no way this is how it's supposed to work. And I think busy work is part of a lot of traditional consulting in a traditional operating system.
I think that's right. And I think what you're pointing to that's important to call out is like that brute forcing of something like a cross-functional strategic project is then basically creating like a false operating system that lives over there and allowing the existing one to persist. So a lot of times the reasons that we don't see cross-functional cooperation go well is like misaligned incentives, lack of clarified strategy, lack of dedicated resources, lack of like coherent authority, who has the last word, blah, blah, blah. And when you just say, okay, now there's this team of consultants here, and they're going to tell you when to be in what meetings and what templates to fill out, and then they're going to make sense of it and create a plan, and then like check in with you every Thursday on your status, and then they're going to be the ones reporting the work, then like we never investigate. Well, like the fact is that like Sam and Rodney's bonus structures actually pit them against each other. Or the fact is that like these two leaders actually don't value the same strategic priority, and there's a lot of dissonance between their teams as a result. Or the fact is that the CEO is saying this is the most important thing, but is starving this project of resources, so it doesn't feel like the most like we like this sort of external capacity lets those things persist, and those things will still be there and be problematic at the end of the project, even if the project is successful.
Well, and not only will they still be there, they will probably have gotten worse, because generally problems that are left kind of in the dark don't spontaneously resolve themselves. They tend to fester and get worse.
So weird. It's such a bummer.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think too. I wonder. I have not worked for a traditional consulting firm, but I have friends who do, and I wonder if actually one of the things that often kind of goes on is that the consultants kind of have permission to have a more adaptive operating system.
I
to
think so.
Get the work done, and they get to kind of dart in and out of the existing operating system, getting things done, and it looks like they're getting a lot of things done. The client is happy, but once that consultant entity leaves, they don't leave behind the operating system that they themselves were getting to use. They leave behind what they originally found. And you're no better off, and to my previous point, probably worse than you were before.
I think that's right. I mean, I have been the client of a large consulting firm, and that was very much my experience.
Oh, you mean that time the Ready hired McKinsey to fix us?
Yeah, it was weird. No, no, prior life. But as a client, that was very much my experience of like the person that I was working with from a large organization was much more nimble than I was in terms of the norms of the company that I worked in. And she was able to just like go get information that like I would have probably been like scolded or side-eyed for asking for. Yeah. But it was her remit. So she was able to go and like do this work that I think probably most of us could have done, but did not feel like we had the authority to do.
Totally. And to be clear, like that's what we do too at the Ready, but I like to think that we do it in a way where we are creating like positive disruption along the way, where we are like telling the organization like, hey, notice this thing, how I get to like avoid all of this bureaucracy to go like make something happen. Like this is the work for us to be digging into. Like, let's put it on the backlog. Let's make sure we don't just pretend that if I'm able to go do something as the external consultant, that is okay, that we fixed it. Because remember, we're working to the day that we get to leave, and you all are continuing the work without us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the ways that you see that show up in the work is that we're not just ignoring the org chart for ourselves, though we usually are. We're also like very much encouraging leaders to put the org chart aside. So like when I'm in a project and a leader says like, oh, you should go ask this person for this. I'm like, well, why don't you ask them? Or why are we not in a conversation together? Or when the leader says like, how is my team doing on this? I'm like, well, you should come to their meeting and see. Like, I'm not there to messenger information so that the org chart can stay tidy and people don't have to be in dialogue with each other. Like, my job is to be like, look, I can do that and so can you. And also I'm going to leave here and then what's going to happen? Right. So like, it'd probably be good if you had a way of getting this intel yourself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally. All right. Is there anything else worth digging into about kind of that initial pattern of using external consultants to band-aid a broken operating system?
I think the only thing, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in terms of what to do, but I think the only other thing is like, I think a lot of consulting firms in many spaces really survive based on their like expertise, being seen as experts in a particular industry or a particular technology. And some of that is like just from them having a lot of experience and portfolio of clients and gathering those lessons. And some of it is because they have like really good research engines and things like that. I think the thing about that makes it quite sticky is that most people in large companies, most people in large companies, I think, are a little bit paranoid about what they don't know. I think it's very easy in this world that spins so rapidly and, operates at the speed and complexity that most of us do, to really feel like you do not have your finger on the pulse in the way that you would like to, especially since most of our clients spend a lot of their days and a lot of their times not looking externally. And so I think that the feeling is that sometimes these organizations are filling an information gap, either filling a gap that exists or again are able to be sort of the symbolic validation, so that when the client goes, I think that the next wave for us geographically is in sub-Saharan Africa, and the consulting firm goes, well, that's right, and here is the data to support that. That's very calming and validating. And I don't think that that's bad on its face. I just think that clients forget that, first of all, best practices are always backwards looking, which means that if they've been proven, that doesn't mean they're bad, but it also doesn't mean that they're going to serve now or in the future.
Yeah, you're not on the cutting edge.
They're not on the cutting edge if they're a best practice.
The consultant, yeah.
And I think that it creates, it's creating a dependence, because clients who I've spoken with occasionally have the feeling that they don't know and they couldn't know, and they have to get this information somewhere else. And I think to a certain extent, external sources are really good and really valid. But I also don't think it's okay for companies to just say, we don't have a mechanism for sensing the external environment, and so we will always and forever depend on someone to tell us what should be important to us.
Yeah, it's the difference between augmenting a practice of looking externally and sense making around yourself versus completely outsourcing it to another entity to do your thinking for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the part of it that bugs me, is that I'm don't let someone else do it in collaboration, do it in partnership, do it as augmentation, but don't be I don't know, I'm just so busy propping up the core business, I have no idea to think, no time to think about what the next big idea is. It's bro, that's got, the thinking part has got to be part of the job. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Sam,
right.
I feel we have
quick
retro this pattern.
Quick retro, though. I feel we weren't too harsh on that, were we? We were pretty good. Pretty even keel.
I think it was even keeled. I think
so.
Yeah. I think, to me, it feels balanced. It doesn't feel like a roastery. It feels like just calling it what it is.
If you happen to work at one of these traditional consulting firms and you have thoughts about how we have kind of captured our views of it, you should send us an email, because I would actually really love to talk to you to get the inside scoop.
Me too.
Okay.
Retro all right, Sam. Over. Retro over. So now I want to hear about what to do. So if the pattern is clients are hiring trad consultants to uphold an operating system that they are not satisfied with, and then occasionally are getting us confused with that, what would you invite our existing or future clients to do instead of that?
This is the place where I'm supposed to say they should hire us, right? This is the entire section. It's just just don't do that and hire us instead, and it'll be better.
Don't turn that dial. Sam's about to do a tight 20 on.
Oh, no, that was it.
Right.
That was all I had.
Oh, that was it. Good. Good insights, bud. I'm glad you're here.
This is why I'm not on the growth team at the Ready. Actually, no, I'm okay at selling our work. But I say all of that in jest. But I think this is the opportunity for us to talk a little bit more about how we get after the work instead. If you're not going to use kind of your existing reckons about management consultants for us, what should you replace them with, I think is worth talking a little bit more about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different places we could kind of dive deeper into. And I guess a good starting point, or the one that I'd want to dig into first, is I think the one that we have written here about principles besides growth and extraction. Those are principles that do not really show up in like how we talk about the work. And what that doesn't mean is that we don't care about effectiveness or like financial results for organizations. I think sometimes people will actually swing way harder the other direction with thinking about who we are. And we're just like, they assume that we're just about like warm, fuzzy feelings, making vibes, making people feel good at work, happiness at work, like that sort of thing. Yeah, all those things are great and like worthy in and of themselves, but we do not pursue those kind of in a vacuum away from like, how does the organization actually work? And everything we do and believe about organizations and their operating systems is around effectiveness. We do this stuff, all the stuff that we believe, because it makes organizations more effective. And we truly believe that the only way many, if not most, of the huge wicked problems that we face literally as a human species will ever be solved is through organizations. So like, let's get them right. That's what we care about. And if along the way we get to be humans, that's amazing and awesome, and let's do that too. But it's not just that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that, in terms of what to do and whether this involves talking to us or just doing it yourself, like the invitation that I would have is to think about how you create clarity in your organization, not just like outsource the clarity to someone else, to the point that Sam made earlier. And to the extent that you do find a partner outside of your organization to do whatever you need partnering on, like how do you find someone that is interested in and incentivized to and knows how to create that capacity in you, or to change your operating system so that you are capable of doing this thing the next time, whether that's changing your purpose, whether that's rethinking what kind of like leadership models you have, whether that's looking at your comp structure, like whatever the thing is doing that you feel like you need outside help to overhaul, how much do you expect to just always need that outside help? Like how I'm always going to need an external tax provider, and how much do you want to hire someone that's going to teach you to fish? That I want people to be asking themselves that question.
I mean, I guess, how do you know if what you need is like someone like us because it's truly an operating system thing and not just a thing that you can externalize? Like, we have tax professionals who don't necessarily work for us do our taxes because that just makes sense. We don't need to bring that in. How do you differentiate between those, do you think?
I've never really thought about it till right now, but
yeah.
I think that where just straight up outsourcing stuff makes sense is where it doesn't really take a shift in the operating system to make use of it. So we don't need to change the way that we work at the Ready to partner with a tax advisor.
Right.
And also it's not core to our business. So I think anything that feels like it is part of the DNA of the organization, how we meet, how we make decisions, how we structure, how we create and steer strategy, how we decide and like communicate, how we use tooling, like those things are things that are evergreen in terms of how an organization operates. And I don't want the thinking and doing of those things to be separated.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm realizing I also have not thought about how to answer this question until I just asked it. But I think there's something about things that you do very frequently and are just part of how we work. So, how we meet, how we, talk about strategy, how we operationalize strategy, as opposed to kind of concrete, distinct things that happen either on a rhythm or maybe even stochastically, but they are kind of their own entity that can be carved off from everything else. But if you're talking about anything that is happening regularly, that means you have probably a lot of opportunities where even minor improvements will build on top of each other over time in ways that can have impact that is hard to think about early on.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. The other invitation I have here is like, which is like, this is going to maybe sound a little hippy dippy, but bear with me. When you're considering a partnership with someone or with an organization that is meant to change something about how you actually serve your customer, bring your product or service to market, how you actually do the work of your business, I would invite companies to look at whether they want to be like the people they are hiring. So something that we hear a lot in client engagements is like, there's often a little bit of like, it must be nice to work at the Ready. And you know, clients, we have former clients that work at the Ready. Clients ask to work at the Ready all the time. And I think that the reason for that is because, first of all, to your point, Sam, they see that there's not a lot of bullshit work in our work, which I think feels refreshing for a lot of them coming from where they're coming from. Two is I think they see the way that we like relate to each other, that is not particularly hierarchical, that is not like command and control, that is quite like authentic generally in nature. And I think they see the creativity in our work because we prioritize the time and space to be thoughtful about the work that we do and the designs that we create and things like that. And so I'm saying this because like I learned once in a therapeutic, like coaching related training, this idea that like in the room between the coach and the client is a place to practice something different that then can be translated to the broader world. And I think the same is true in a consulting partnership. So it's like, pick the team of consultants that are the way that you would like your team to be and practice with them. Like I often say to clients that are struggling with something like candor, I'm like, tell me the thing. Like I can take it. Say the thing to me in an unvarnished, super direct, maybe kind of shitty way that you would never say to a teammate, so that like you can start to get reps of seeing that the sky doesn't fall and like we're going to be okay, even though this is hard. That was a long-winded way of saying like, seek the kinds of partners that you want to be positively disrupted by, if in fact you want to be disrupted. Otherwise, just ignore the last 3 minutes.
Well, and then I love that, because that last little bit there about, you know, if you want to be disrupted, when I think about especially early client engagements that, you know, didn't go well and we either mutually fired each other or we fired the client, it's because there was a misunderstanding about what was expected from them to do the work. So you use that word reps, which implies like we are going to practice, we are going to show up and do the work. And it's not going to be this thing where like we come in, do our smart consultant thing, give you a thing, and then leave. That's not the modality. And sometimes, especially in the early days, we didn't do a great job of filtering or setting those expectations. And then there would be like a real kind of culture shock of like, wait, what? We're going to do what? Like you're going to be like in the meetings with me and we're going to like actually try to do things differently. You're not just going to give me your report. And you have to be game for this to go well, which means you have to be game for actually wrestling with some uncomfortable stuff with guidance, with help, with folks who have been on that path before. But it'll be more effective, but it won't necessarily be easier.
Right. And I think in that vein, in terms of like our contracting and where we've certainly missed in the past, but I think we're getting better all the time, is just like understanding that partnership is partnership. And even if you are the client and you are paying the consultant, whoever that consultant is, both sides are going to have needs in order to make a successful partnership. So like what we might need is your time or your dedication or your feedback or your patience. I mean, this is one, like I just had a conversation today with someone where I was saying and just validating their experience that like, it does often feel for the first 3 months like nothing is happening. Right up until shit is happening everywhere. And so something that I often will say to clients that I need is like, I'm going to need a little bit of grace from you and for you to trust me for a little while that like the seeds are under the ground right now, but like shit is happening and you will eventually have flowers, but I can't force them out of the ground because you set an arbitrary date. So like we have to contract around this. I don't know. That's sort of an aside, but all of these things feel to me like if you're going to try to do something different in your operating system, these are really important considerations for doing that, whether you're doing it yourself or you're doing it with someone else.
Totally agreed.
So another idea that's not just like outsource your strategy to someone who will give it to you, whether that's like a super cool dude agency or whether it's like one of the old guard, is create your first strategy stack of pancakes. See also the strategy podcast episode to tell you about those pancakes. Try doing one yourself and then like create the tension of what is actually missing. So say you're on a leadership team and you know that you need to be doing some experimentation around AI. And say that at your quarterly day-long strategy meeting, you all revisit your long-term essential intent, and then you're looking at your 90-day outcomes, and you're like, we have an outcome here around a first bite at the AI apple in our roadmap, and we actually have no idea how to do that or how to get after that. This is a very good moment for buying external expertise or doing external research or finding an expert to help you. The reason that I'm using this like as an example is just I think that there is a lot of value in getting external advice and expertise. I just think that you should dial in what you're trying to do and then ask for it rather than asking someone else to tell you what to do instead.
Yeah. I wonder if there's like a rule of thumb, and I don't know if the numbers would work at all about this, but for every X dollar that you're willing to spend on external person or entity to tell you something or give you something, set aside an equal amount for internal resourcing around actually operationalizing that or actually doing something with that information. If that means you have to spend half as much as you normally would, then do that. And use that other half to actually focus on spinning up a mission-based team or otherwise resourcing a group of people to go do something with that information.
Yes. And if you're going to get external support for the content, get external support for the context. So that doesn't have to be the ready. Get like maybe it is, agile coaches, or maybe it is psychotherapists. I don't know what the particular team needs, but don't just go, okay, now we have the thing and let's hope for the best on the inside of the organization. Like now we know where we're driving, so hopefully this is the car that gets us there. Don't do that. Like if you're going to invest in the map, then also invest in the car. And you're just going to have a much, much higher chance of getting where you're trying to go.
I like that. Don't just invest in the map, invest in the car. Ooh.
Thanks, Sam.
Smart.
Deep thoughts for 510. Midweek.
I know.
This is what we get when I go to a spa for a week. Ding, ding, ding.
I know. You're like, we are representing like opposite ends of like the human like psychological continuum. Like you're coming back all refreshed and wise, and I'm on the front end of a multi-state move, and my brain is just like kind of falling out of my ears. And together we make one great podcast.
We make one great podcast host. Two people.
One great podcast host in this two-person podcast.
That's very good.
Is there anything left unsaid or anything that we've been like dancing around? I don't feel like I've been dancing around anything, but let's just check in. Have we not said anything that we feel like we should say in this moment of like talking about what it is like to work with us or someone like us. There are other organizations, friends of ours, who do similar
Sure.
work to us as
Yeah.
well. So it's not just for the ready. I very much hope some of our friends in other orgs use this episode as like a growth tool for themselves. Like, this is what it's like to work with us, because we really do care about this type of work spreading into more and more organizations. It's not about just the ready becoming as big and as successful as possible. Like, that is not the end game here.
Definitely not. And if anything, the intention of this episode is less about us and it's more about clarity. Like, I just want clients to be clear on what they're buying from whom. That's it. Yeah. To me, that is the whole banana, so that they're not mad at me when they don't get a fucking PowerPoint deck, and they're not mad at the strategy consultants when they don't get a new operating system. I'm just like, yo, you're buying two different things. Like, on the one hand, you're buying from us personal training, and on the other hand, you're buying a training plan. And those are two different things. And so, like, let's just not be confused about them. I don't know. The only thing that, like, is probably worth saying is, like, our business model is actually, like, very stupid. And if you want to make a lot of money and have an easier life and, you know, a more straightforward way of doing this work, don't do what we do. Yeah. Like, do it the other way.
There's a reason that the big consulting firms are big and everyday names and make a shit ton more money.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, absolutely don't get into the game of disrupting, of, like, literally biting the hand. Not literally. We don't literally bite the hand that feeds us.
As far as you know.
I mean, I probably wouldn't know if at the edge we were literally biting the hands that feed us. But
I would love to see the Slack message from one of our teammates. It's like, hey, everyone, just want to let you know there's going to be something coming up. You know, I bit someone today.
It's in help. It's like, what do you do? Does anybody been in this situation where they've bitten a client? But no, none of that. None of that has ever happened. We don't do that. But just, like, to say out loud, it's really tricky, if you do what we do for a living, to be in the situation where the person who is trusting you and paying you is also going to be made uncomfortable by you almost immediately and for a protracted period of time. So, like, everybody's got to just, like, have the stomach and the spine for that, because that's what's going to happen if the work actually works. And leaders say to me all the time, like, I went through some dark nights of the soul on this project where I really questioned, like, if we were on the right track, if I was up for it, if I could make it through this, if I could, like, you know, hold off the forces around me long enough to show that this was the way. It's hard. It's fundamentally the only way. It's fundamentally worth it to have an operating system that can do shit, but, like, it's not the smart business to be in, for sure. Yeah.
No, totally. And I think that's why when it goes well, it goes really well, and it's transformational. And you get, you know, those, like, literal friendships that have emerged from our work. I mean, like, Friday, I'm going to lunch with a former client who we worked together with for a long time, and I've stayed in touch with because, you know, we went through some shit together. Yeah. And it's hard to not emerge from the other side with like not having that really deep respect for each other that you get from doing something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the truth of the partnership is that it is almost always transformational in both directions. I have never had a long-term client that did not fundamentally change, like, how I think about something significant. So this is how it goes. I think that feels like a pretty good place to wrap things up, and we're going to do that in a new way today. All right. Closing round. So, y'all, you've heard 200 check-in rounds because there have been 200 episodes of this show. The other practice that we do at the end of meetings is a closing round. And we've never done closing round on this show, but we're going to start now because we didn't really like the hot take thing, even though it had great music and great vocals from Sam.
Sure did.
And we just think it's fun to add another practice that you all can be using. So, Sam, I'm going to go with the old school. What did you learn from this time, this 1 hour and 4 minutes together, at least 12 of which was just you and I screwing around.
What did I learn?
What did you learn?
I really just appreciated hearing you give a more nuanced take about what traditional consulting is trying to do and what they are actually selling. I am a baby in all of this. I'm just a little baby man in that I came right out of grad school directly to the ready. Had my only interaction with traditional consulting has largely been kind of like ships passing in the night within large client organizations, and then what I read in the media. And that is a very, I think, skewed sense of like what these organizations actually are. So I feel like I have a better appreciation, dare say empathy, maybe, for what these organizations are really good at and what they, if you need what they are selling, how they are actually quite good at that. And then by you doing that, I really appreciate that greater clarity now about what it looks like to buy the map versus work on the car, to use your metaphor.
Sweet. I learned a lot making this episode. I think that there have been times at clients where feeling like we're batting cleanup after a new strategy or purpose statement or structure has been purchased has like not felt great. And even in sales processes where people are like, well, we had a bad experience doing this. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know what to tell you because these things are not related to each other. And like, I didn't do it and I wasn't there. And that's not what I do for a living. I think, though, it's very easy for me to have an emotional take on that is from like challenging lived experiences and having this more nuanced conversation about just creating clarity and articulating the difference between the content and the context and understanding that there's tons we don't know because neither of us work in that field and we're mostly hearing and seeing things third hand. But like, I think that I really learned through the conversation and the research that Jack did beforehand about what is valuable about the map and why the car is ever so important to invest in as well.
Cool. The main thing I'm taking away is that apparently I am a mechanic. Because I'm working on the car, right?
Good.
And that's what we're going with the metaphor. I'm really handy. I know where all the car things go, the different parts, the filters
the car
and the
things.
pipes
Perfect.
and the catalytic converters and whatnot.
I trust you implicitly with this.
That's why I'm always showing up to every meeting with grease all over my hands from working on the car.
I love it. All right.
All right. Well, we're always looking for new topics. So if you have an organizational pattern that you're having trouble changing, please shoot us a note at podcast@theready.com.
Also send your guest pitches there. If you send them to my email address, you're probably not going to get a response. This show was engineered by Taylor Marvin and produced by the inimitable Jack Van Amberg. At Work with The Ready is created by The Ready, where we help organizations around the world change the way they work, whether that's what they really want or not. Thanks so much for listening.